The year is 2014. After surviving the predicted doomsday of 2012, the people are as happy as ever, and PAX opens their convention once again. The crowds are bustling and the gamers are playing. In the midst of all this, a small studio named Unknown Worlds Entertainment has opened their demo for a new game called Subnautica. Previously known for their game Natural Selection, which did do well by all means, but was no smash hit. Regardless, they were hoping for this coming project to be their big break, and it was. Many months of development later, the game was fully released in 2016 to critical acclaim. The timing was perfect. It was at the height of the current YouTube craze that was Let's Plays, and was a perfect encapsulation of the games that were being played. That being anything and everything that could be overreacted to. Most commonly, survival horror games.
And right behind me! Oh god, it is! Oh frick! Shit! Is it coming for me? Oh, it's coming for me, isn't it? Oh god! What are you? What do you want? Go away! I don't like you! Oh god!
Needless to say, an abundant amount of quality content was created.
Oh god!
While I never played it myself, I was sure to watch many of the Let's Plays that garnered the game so much attention. After its great success, a sequel was inevitable, and in 2019 an early access game was released, Subnautica Below Zero. Then not too long after, the full game was officially released on May 14th, 2021. And just a few days later, I picked it up as well. After having played through Subnautica Below Zero in its entirety, I can confidently say that I disliked a grand majority of my time with the game. But I also know this will be quite the opposite for others. Now, this is quite the claim, especially for me. I generally don't like to come down too hard on games, and prefer to look at what they do right. It's a more positive outlook, and it's generally healthier to learn from others' successes rather than their failures. But so many of Subnautica's mechanics drive me so far up the wall. Not because of the fact that some were poorly implemented, but because how such drastic problems could have been so easily fixed, yet weren't for reasons I can't understand. Subnautica Below Zero fights a losing battle against tedium, realism, and game function, in an experience in which its greatest flaws are those of constant inconveniences and a blatant lack of polish. I truly believe that underneath all these poorly thought out ideas and mechanics is a truly great and inspired game with a developed and well thought out world, beautiful environments, great core mechanics, and some of the most tense moments I've ever experienced in a video game. Unfortunately, Subnautica cannot help but play its cards too early, without putting too much thought into what will happen when it does so prematurely. Now, I don't just plan on blurting out more insults, but I don't believe that Subnautica Below Zero was ready to be released. I also realize the importance of explaining my reasonings, so during this video I will be going through Subnautica Below Zero in its entirety, going through all of its mechanics, design choices, and story, all the while discussing what makes them work so well, or so poorly, while also delving deeper into a certain few areas that I deemed worthy of a closer look. This is a long video, the longest I have ever made, so I've done my best to both split this video into categories, so there will be places where you can pause and return while being reintroduced to the topic properly, as well as explaining everything in such a way that you can listen to this as a podcast if you wish. Although you will miss out on some of the visual spectacle Subnautica has to offer. I do not recommend watching this video if you are considering buying Subnautica Below Zero, as much of its draw is in its mystery and the player's lack of knowledge, which it masterfully uses to its advantage. Sometimes. The entire game will be spoiled during the duration of this video, so if you do end up playing the game afterwards, not only will the game be showing you its cards too early, you'll already know its entire hand. If you happen to be on the line about buying Subnautica, and are now doubting if you should give this game a shot, I'll tell you this. I would recommend this game to anyone who likes exploring a vast, unknown world, and are okay to do so without extrinsic rewards waiting for them. Exploring biomes and returning to previous ones is 85% of the game. So if you enjoy that type of gameplay mixed with some survival elements and sea creatures, while not minding a lot of tedium and bugs, I think you would enjoy the game. But most importantly, do not buy this game on your Nintendo Switch like I did. You will regret it. We start the game similar to the last, crashing into the atmosphere and hurtling down towards a watery planet. In this game you play as Robin, looking to learn more about your sister's death that occurred on this planet while working for Altera, a corporation known for their scheming and dirty money-making tactics. After a smooth landing, you quickly take notes of your surroundings and head into the water in search of your life pod. You'll find it, take inventory, and that's about it. You're left without knowledge of your surroundings, a lack of sustainability, and no sense of what to do next. Many survival games, from Minecraft to Breath of the Wild, are at their best in this early phase, where the player is extremely limited in resources, but most importantly, knowledge, lending to a sense of mystery, giving the player a natural reason to go exploring, a drive to learn more. This is far better than having a specific marker or AI leading the player to the next zone, and is one of the best parts of any survival game. But I would argue Subnautica benefits even more than most. In Minecraft, you don't really question the world you're in, and it's relatively normal at first glance. In Breath of the Wild, the world is quite odd, but you know you're in Hyrule, where you can expect to be killing bokoblins and saving Zelda. But Here you're on an alien planet in the middle of a virtually endless ocean. With no knowledge of your surroundings or the monsters that may lurk within, combined with the lack of a clear goal, the first few hours really make you feel like Spider-Man. I mean someone who's stranded on an alien planet. While not having an exact placement, each playthrough your landing pod will always be in the same relative area inside of the shallows, where there are next to no aggressive enemies. Yet the fear of them still remains as you look off to deeper, still inaccessible areas. General insight will lead the player to assume that they'll have to build the scanner, as it's one of the few possible recipes on their fabricator. While gathering the resources for it, the player will constantly be interacting with one of Subnautica's best core mechanics, the oxygen system. This is a great way to limit the players from zones you don't want them to explore yet. For these reasons 3. 1. It feels like a real reason. It makes complete sense why you would run out of oxygen. It's not just the game arbitrarily telling you that you can't go somewhere, as many other games do. Secondly, it's flexible. If you manage to take efficient enough routes, or manage to get plants that regain some of your oxygen, you can push deeper than it feels like you're supposed to go, even giving the feeling of outsmarting the developers, when in reality they've put these plants here with that exact intent. Lastly, there's the risk-reward system, always having to consider whether you should head up to the surface for air or push further and collect just one more item before heading up. This does wonders in keeping resource gathering fresh and interesting, as you can always get better at it, compared to most games where resource gathering has a skill ceiling about 1 inch off the ground. While exploring, you'll find resources from 3 main groups: plants, some for crafting and others to eat; minerals, which can either be out in the open or require breaking open an ore deposit before collecting; and finally different machine fragments. To create said machines, the player will have to scan around 3 parts scattered around an area, which will then give them a blueprint, telling them the resources required to build it. The first of which being the Sea Glide. The Sea Glide is an equipable item in your hotbar just like the scanner, and gives you a massive speed increase when it's in your hands, allowing you to dive much deeper, as you can get to the surface faster, wasting less oxygen on your descent and return to the surface. By this time you'll also be running out of food you got from your ship, and will have to start collecting something to eat. The system is simple and efficient. You'll find food around the map that you can eat, often regenerating both hunger and thirst, but spoiling over time. You can also collect fish, which only start to spoil after being cooked at your base, unless that is you put your fine dining skills to use and cook them with some salt, preserving them indefinitely. For water, you'll have to waterfy some bladderfish that also swim out in the open. While nothing special, this system works well, with my only real gripe being that you can't cook more than one fish at a time. This system does become more and more automated over time, which is a very satisfying progression, but we're not quite there yet. After enough game time, you'll get a signal from an Aurorian base, located far enough away that in the early game will seem like a decently long trip. On this journey, we will run into the Cryptosuchus? This guy. Other than having a mouthful of a name, it also has a mouthful of dangerous looking teeth, being the first animal on this playthrough that can really be qualified as a sea monster. Their chomping frenzies and loud roars may scare most people into thinking that they should be given large berths of space, but it won't take long for the player to realize that these are much more bark than bite. As well as barely being fast enough to catch up to a player using the Sea Glide, they deal a pitiful amount of damage and never attack twice, always swimming away after taking off a pint of your health bar. This is an interesting design choice that I can't really wrap my head around. You see, one of Subnautica's main draws is in everyone's slight thalassophobia. I think I pronounced that right, but more importantly it describes the fear of the deep sea. More specifically, not knowing what may be lurking inside of its depths. Other things that add to this fear is the limited visibility to see said things, the fact that creatures can come at you from any angle, and the fact that you don't really have any way to escape. This fear is what makes exploring new biomes in Subnautica so tense, constantly keeping you on the edge of your seat. Without it, I wouldn't find the game half as interesting. However, much of this is entirely a mental fear. I mean, there are absolutely no consequences to being eaten by a sea monster in a video game. So, the game should be doing everything in its ability to convince the player to stay scared. So it baffles me to see the game try and get rid of that philosophy with its very first enemy, teaching the player that even these terrifying creatures with palpable roars and nightmare-inducing designs are nothing to be afraid of, and even if they do manage to attack you, well, they'll probably just swim away afterwards, never pursuing nearly long enough to be a serious threat. Not only does this completely remove any tension around this entire area where these creatures reside, turning them from a mystical and deadly alien sea creature to a minor annoyance, it teaches the player to not fear any future monsters, as if these guys are any indicator, they'll most likely be practically harmless. I will talk more about other enemies once we encounter them, but for now we climb on board this island and see our first sign of other humans, in the form of an old lady in a mech suit threatening to skewer us before bouncing away, warning us not to follow her. Further ahead, there's an abandoned base where you'll find some long-lost PDAs, giving you some information about scientists who worked with Sam, as well as some scannable base parts and the base builder, letting the player create bases utilizing resources they've collected. After returning to the water, the player will be shown where the mech girl went off to, and if you're anything like me, proceed to ignore her only order and try and follow her. Once arriving, you'll unfortunately realize that it's much too deep to reach right now, but it does give the player a concrete goal to walk towards. A perceptive player will also notice a few scannable fragments for the sea truck, but not quite enough to finish the blueprint. So it's back to exploring, looking for the... Oh, the game crashed. That's weird. Anyway. Oh, it doesn't autosave. No. Well, good to know. 4 entire hours into my playthrough. So I returned to planet 4546b, rebuilt the scanner, collected the Sea Glide fragments, returned to the island and restarted my base, and didn't forget to save this time. What the fuck? So not only does it not autosave, it crashes when you save. This is doubly inexcusable because I'm not using a PC that could just not run the game as the devs expected, as each computer is different, but a Switch, all of which are the exact same. So either the devs decided that their game crashing every second hour was acceptable on a home console, or they just skipped playtesting on it altogether. Either way, it's completely inexcusable. During the 30 hours it took me to get to the start to the end of this game, the game crashed 15 times, losing me a total of 11 hours. What? I mean, I could have spent that time driving across New Zealand, and now I'll never get the chance. And if to add insult to injury, each and every time you reboot the game after it crashes, it'll ask if you want to report any feedback or criticisms, as if it's just taunting you, daring you to insult the game's performance. So, after replaying the starting sequence for the third time, I ran into this alien structure in the Ridgeback Reefs near the starting area, meeting an alien who immediately forces its consciousness into yours, and insists that you call it Alan. He then adamantly refuses to leave your head until you rebuild a body for him, which will take the scanning of many alien structures all around the map, which can either be found by chance or every once in a while you'll get the coordinates to one. If finding the old lady pilot was more of a long-term goal, these are your short-term ones, often providing the player with a reason to explore biomes they wouldn't have otherwise. Alan is yet another example of Subnautica kicking itself in the foot for no good reason. The dev team has clearly put a lot of thought into this world and its inhabitants. Alan even starts to tease us with knowledge about his race and their culture, and I wanted nothing more but for him to teach me more, as someone on the dev team clearly had a fascinating vision for his race and had a unique system for how they communicated, their culture, and even how their emotions worked. But they relegate him to simply congratulating you once you finish mundane tasks, or even worse, falling to the trope of alien no understand human emotion. He would be the perfect storytelling device instead of PDAs that were for some reason left all over the planet, since he was there during the time they were all made, and instead of just being a flat, non-interactable PDA, bros could ask him questions about what he said, and there would be more of a conversation than an info dump. I definitely think that the game would have benefited heavily from this type of interaction, but alas, they did not take that opportunity. If the player missed the sea truck fragments back at the Delta base, they'll most likely pick them up near where they found Alan, and after some simple resource gathering, they'll be able to create their first ever vehicle. Far too soon, if you ask me. The sea truck provides you with three main uses, surprisingly the least useful of the three being travel. It has a far faster movement speed than the player, so will generally be used when traversing biomes. Its second and far more game-changing use is its portable air. Where you used to have to swim all the way back to the surface each time you needed to regain your breath, which of course took away a lot of time from scanning the sea floor for resources, you can now quickly pop back into your sea truck for a few seconds, then return to swimming. One new mechanic in this game is the ability to attach little pods to the back of the sea truck, each having different uses from storage to a portable fish tank, but these became more of a novelty to me, and I never left them on as they made caves and corners impossible to traverse. Now to keep the player from having access to the entire map already, there's a caveat in place. It can only go down 150 meters before constantly taking damage, eventually exploding. Other than being an area where Subnautica can't decide between realism or gameplay, as the player can swim far deeper than a metal machine, it also takes away some of the organicness of the oxygen system. It's less of something that you can toy with. It's just an arbitrary flat number you can't go deeper than with your machine. But still, these are all good additions to the player's toolkit, and I think it's been well paced. So why am I saying that it shouldn't have been given to the player yet? Well, because it takes away Subnautica's strongest card, its organic ability to create fear within the player. Breath of the Wild's Lynels are a foe that'll slay you within seconds, and escape is nigh impossible with its deadly accuracy. Then you have Subnautica's Calycerate. It screeches while patrolling the volcanic vents, warning everybody nearby of its presence, and if you get too close, you'll have to swim like hell to get out of its range. But unlike the Lynel, you can almost always escape by the skin of your teeth. Now to an alien like Alan who doesn't understand human emotions, it would seem like the Lynel should be far scarier. It's far more of a threat after all, routinely one-shotting the player and never allowing escape. Yet, escape is what keeps Subnautica's monsters so terrifying. Once the Lynel kills the player for the first time, so much of the fear surrounding them is gone. They might still be threatening, but the player has now rationalized that the very worst thing this monster can do is send them back to a save point. But Subnautica's creatures rarely catch you. I mean, if they did, they wouldn't deal enough damage to kill the player, but seeing that the player has never been caught, they don't know that. So it's on them to imagine what horrors might happen if the sea monster ever does catch up to them. The devs put a lot of effort into making these creatures just barely avoidable, keeping the player in this mindset for as long as possible, never letting them realize that, in reality, these monsters will almost never get the chance to kill you. Even better, these attacks aren't scripted. You don't open a specific door triggering the AI to jump scare the player. No, it's a sea monster that swims around on its free will and attacks you whenever and however it wants, making the fear it creates much more organic and, well, real. However, this system has a very big flaw that comes into play far too soon. With the Lynel, while the fear goes down once getting killed, you still do fear their danger. But with Subnautica's creatures, while still extremely terrifying before you know what they're capable of, once you learn how truly weak they are, the fear drops exponentially. You now know what they're capable of, except unlike the Lynel, what these sea creatures are capable of is barely anything. The Subnautica devs couldn't just make these creatures more dangerous either. Without a proper combat or stealth system, they had no choice but to make these enemies relatively weak, relying instead on the player being scared of the monster and not its mechanics. But this mental fear is only further thrown out the window once the player acquires a vehicle. As I just went over, the fear of Subnautica's creatures is a mental one, stemming largely from the vulnerability felt from swimming in a vast ocean with nothing to protect you from deep-sea creatures. So when the player gains access to a machine, not only does it weaken the enemies by gaining a physical in-game defense, it completely obliterates any mental fears you might have had as well. You're no longer alone in the ocean. You're in a mini submarine that can eventually be equipped with fucking rockets. You'll quickly learn that any attacks deal a pitiful amount of damage to it, and can be repaired within seconds. Again, completely removing one of the game's main enemies from my fears, and into the bucket with the cryptosuchus of minor annoyances, who, incidentally, are now killed by a slight bump of your new machine. This situation could be slightly remedied with a larger enemy variety, as there would be more creatures to fear before learning their true nature. But currently there are only 3 dangerous Leviathan class creatures, one of them only ever being found on land. Let's say a playthrough takes you 30 hours. That would mean that you only encounter a new one of these once every 10 hours. Regardless of how many creatures they add, the introduction of machines dulls these monsters from phobia to waning novelty. So I think they should have implemented the creation of these machines a bit later, or just reduced their blocking capabilities so a bit of fear still remained. Anyway, at this point the player will most likely return to the pilot's last known location, and with the help of a depth module, easily reach the pilot's base. We learn that this pilot is Marguerite Maida, and that she's being tracked by an Altera scanner. She promises you more info about your sister's death if you can shut it down, requiring you to find the parallel processing unit, as well as letting you scan the first fragment of a snowbike, giving the player a machine to look forwards to acquiring. But more importantly, how did she get this snow stalker down here? There's not exactly room for 2 in this thing. Maybe it's actually really skinny and all its mass is just fur that can be compressed. Or maybe... I'm getting distracted. In the same area, there's the remains of a crashed ship the player can explore for more resources. These ships intertwine flawlessly with Subnautica's mechanics. The combinations of claustrophobia, limited oxygen, maze-like corridors on weird angles, flipping your sense of direction, keeping you from knowing which way is up or down, all combine to make some great tension, and even panic once you realize you've forgotten the way out. Until you realize that you're only knocked back to your sea moth when you pass out. As well as resources, you'll also be finding PDAs from the ship's ex-occupants, and I was surprised at how well a mere few paragraphs of monologue could get me so attached to characters, but through some unique and fresh voice acting, they somehow managed to suck me into their small disputes and drama, despite knowing that they were all already dead.
It's that one. This planet may be a cold mistress, but maybe it isn't so bad.
As well as the ship, there are some Prawn Suit fragments nearby, which after some more resource gathering will allow the player to create this tank of a machine. The Prawn Suit is essentially a mechanical suit of armor, further distancing yourself from the fear of creatures that may lurk within the sea. It moves by walking and propulsion from boosters that slowly recharge as you stand on solid ground. You can also collect items from the safety of its shell, but if you even move your cursor the slightest bit, it'll miss, which is just annoying, especially with Nintendo Drift. I don't really know why they kept this in. Oh yeah, realism. While I didn't enjoy moving in it nearly as much as the sea truck due to having to stay near the floor, it does have its uses. From its mechanical arms capable of taking out small enemies, to its upgraded arm which lets it mine mineral deposits. One major problem with it is to get out of certain crevices you'll have to be very efficient with your boosters, but when you look up to see where you're going, the roof completely blocks your vision. I don't know how this got past playtesting, as it would seem like a very obvious issue, but anyway. The Prawn Suit has many modules you can build to connect to it, but I only ever added the drill during my playthrough. Too lazy to go through the tedium of gathering more items for upgrades that might not even benefit me, and that was a mistake, because I never used the grappling hooks until the very end of the game. While they might take a while to shoot and not always reach your target, they are a massive upgrade from your usual speed, and add some much needed engagement to getting around, making you think about optimal routes for grappling rather than just moving in a straight line. I only wish I built these earlier in the game. With the limited storage of the crash pod, the player will be forced to make a base sooner rather than later. At first, it'll just be a room with a fabricator and a storage locker, but as you progress, you'll be able to create many more rooms with various uses. There are, however, a few restraints on your expansion. Of course, you'll need resources to build more rooms, but the terrain can also be a major nuisance, being very finicky, making construction impossible if a plant happens to be blocking the way. It was so bad I thought I must have missed a terraformer somewhere, but alas, I was not. For each room connected to a base, the pressure will increase, having to be countered by foundations or reinforced walls. And finally, your base needs to be powered by electricity, whether that's solar or thermal or anything in between. I built my base very close to the surface, so I ended up just using solar panels, even if they barely generated any electricity. And trust me, I would have put on more, but the game slows down enough when you return to your base, and I didn't want my game to crash every single time I came home, in addition to all the other times. But I just didn't want to put the effort in to figure out how to use one of the bigger power sources, and never did. But it's my dream to someday fill my base with solar panels. Base building is also when you'll start to be able to automate food and drink, with a water purification machine and either grow beds or fish tanks for food. While nothing special, it definitely lends to a feeling of finally starting to conquer this alien planet, and gives a nice sense of progression while taking away the tedium of hunting for fish. The grow beds could have been a bit more convenient to use, and a way to preserve plants in your inventory indefinitely, as you can with salted fish, would have been nice. But overall, it's a good system. You'll also be able to install a battery charger for your tools and a power cell charger for the vehicles. You'll be swapping out batteries for your tools dozens, if not hundreds of times in a playthrough, so it'd be nice if you could just tap on the battery charger and instantly have the tools with the lowest charge swap batteries and be done. But no, that's not realistic enough for Subnautica. So instead, you have to select the machine you want to swap batteries with, and if that machine is not in your tiny hotbar, you'll first have to equip it with X, then hit Y and unequip its battery by shifting left. You then have to do that for each individual tool you want to recharge, then tap on the charging station and tap your batteries so they get replaced. Oh wait, no, that'd be nice and efficient. Instead, what happens if you send multiple batteries in from your inventory, they just replace the uncharged batteries. Why? So go back into the charger and collect the exact number of batteries you need, then go back into your inventory and put the dead batteries back into the charger, then exit the menu and go to each individual machine and re-equip them with the newly charged batteries by hitting Y and then moving to the right. Now be ready to redo that process about every half hour. The power cell charger is a bit of a different story. Despite installing it as soon as I discovered its blueprints, I never used it for recharging my machines. And that's because of the machine bay. Not only does this room allow you to dock your machines inside of your base instead of leaving them awkwardly floating at the entrance, it also recharges your machines as long as your base has power, which it better have by now. This is some very nice and well needed streamlining in this tedium-filled game, but unfortunately it does not repair it as well. I suppose that would be too much to ask for. I mean, repairing does normally take a lot of resources, so it just wouldn't be balanced if your base did it for you. It would be nice if you could upgrade it to store both vehicles at once, but again, maybe that's just too much to ask for. Next, we have the scanner room, which is pretty self-explanatory. It scans the surrounding area for minerals and a few other fragments. A good idea in concept, but its scan range is embarrassingly small. And how the hell am I supposed to read this map in the first place? Plus it doesn't scan for plants, which I found far harder to find than any mineral. I do realize that there were some upgrades that'll increase its range or whatever, but I can't see it being useful anywhere near the starting area, which you'll already know like the back of your hand. I also got stuck in the corner for no reason, and couldn't move for like 30 seconds. Anyway, the game crashed after I built it, and I never bothered with refabricating it. Then there's the control deck, which lets you monitor your electricity, even though it's already in the middle of your screen at all times. Much more importantly, it lets you change your once beautiful base to whichever primary color you would like. Combinations include Discord Dark Mode, Pink Bagassias, and Hell on Earth. But in the end I had to leave it on this ugly combination of blue and red. Another problem with the control deck is it marks your base, so you'll always know where it is from far away. And if it's next to your crash pod and sea moth and prawn suit, all of which have their own markers, it really clogs up the screen when heading towards them. I would have really liked to build two bases. It would definitely be cool to have a base in one of the lower biomes as a sort of checkpoint for getting to the deepest biomes. But I could barely even consider it an option because the depth would put a lot of pressure on the building, which would be a pain to deal with. I wouldn't be able to rely on solar panels, but most importantly, my storage would be split between two bases. This game's storage system is already troublesome enough. There was no way I was going to add to that problem. Many survival games struggle with storage systems. Chests become cluttered, and finding the item you want becomes progressively harder the more and more you collect. Subnautica has this problem bad, and yet they've never done anything about it. It was a problem in the first game's early access, during its release, during this game's early access, and again during this game's release. The devs were fully aware of this and yet never changed the system. And it is by no means a tough fix. All they had to do was connect all your storage closets in a base to the Fabricator. This would make it so you can instantly craft things you have the resources for. Sounds pretty reasonable. but instead you have to go through each of your lockers, open them and collect the resources you want, which can often take upwards to 5 minutes. You can take a recipe so you don't have to keep checking what it needs, but it doesn't even show up when you open the locker menu, much less light up the required ingredients. And seeing that you'll be consistently going from locker to locker searching for specific things, it makes sense if the item description of things in your inventory did not block the storage as items. It definitely sounds like I'm coming down hard on the game here, and well, I am, but this is how long it took me to create a small machine that I already had all the items for. And keep in mind, it could have just taken this long. Now this isn't just something that you might do 10 times. No, each playthrough consists of hundreds of fabrications. I cannot think of why the devs wouldn't improve on this obviously flawed system throughout 2 multi-year early accesses and 2 entire games. Even the realism argument starts to lose ground. In a base this futuristic, you'd think you'd be able to plug your stuff into the wall and just have the 3D printer access it. Other UI problems include a hotbar so small you can never fit in all the items you want, the description of buildable structures blocking everything else, and the save. Oh, I guess there's nothing wrong with the save feature. Oh, right. If you've played or even watched the original Subnautica, you'll realize that this game has very similar, nigh identical items, machines, bases, fish, and biomes. Many of Subnautica's assets are used one for one in this new, fully priced game, giving those who actually played the last game less to get excited about. In a game like Subnautica that revolves around the mystery of what you'll find next, this is a real disappointment, and gives this game more of an expansion pass feeling than a fully priced sequel. But back to gameplay. With no real immediate objective, exploring will take up almost all of the early to mid game, and it's some of Subnautica's best. You'll find research stations, long abandoned deep under the sea, with the worst packing jobs in existence. You'll see massive creatures and wonder if they're friend or foe, even interact a bit with creatures like the sea monkey, who might steal your equipment or decide to bring something useful, which was really heartwarming the first time it happened. It's just a shame that these are the only creatures that have any interactability other than attack or swim away. You'll continue on to find caves with entirely new ecosystems within them, and valleys full of gemstones and other minerals. One of my favorite places has to be the abandoned mine site, with an opening too small to bring your sea truck in, limiting your air supply, and inside you find a massive mining center, rusting prawns, and a fully automated but long abandoned system to get minerals back to the surface. Not a single PDA needs to tell me what was going on here. Enough is shown through a mix of known machinery and machines you can infer the purpose of that the player doesn't need to have it explained to them, and is free to imagine the mining process that went on here. Subnautica Below Zero has the ability to create such potent atmospheres for a few reasons. Graphics obviously play a large part. The game looks great, from creatures to biomes and everything in between. While it does show its seams when you inspect the textures from closer up, more often than not, you'll be moving far too fast to notice the smaller details. Subnautica also masterfully uses sound design to its advantage. The roars of far-off creatures, the flow of moving water, and the creaks of machinery always keep you immersed in the world. The downside of a strong atmosphere and immersing realism is that the slightest mistake will completely shatter it. From your base spawning in long after you should have been able to see it, crabs spawning multiple feet above the ground they should be crawling across, rocks placed a few ticks too high on the y-axis, or the game simply crashing are all things that'll shatter the illusion Subnautica worked so hard to create. And it truly does hurt to see it wasting potential due to bugs that weren't addressed, either due to time constraints or a lack of effort in the final few stages of development. And I wish that were all the bugs that tormented the game, but we're barely getting started. This beacon took me over a minute to rename. There's water inside of my sea truck when it's docked. When you leave the carp caves into another biome during night, it goes from perfectly visible to pitch black within seconds. When building a grow bed, the grass textures sometimes look like this. The bike we unlock later freezes in place despite having momentum and nothing in its way. Whales clip through icebergs like it's just more water. Then other smaller fish continue to swim on top of icebergs. It rains inside of caves. When inside my base, my screen would occasionally get this effect. This robot crab got stuck on geometry. Even you will get stuck on the terrain. My prawn suit only acknowledged the laws of physics when I was close by. You'll phase through machines when docking or undocking from the machine bay, and once, I even had this happen. I had become one with nature, able to freely move through it and choosing what I wanted to exist or to disappear, essentially becoming this world's god. Luckily, restarting the game brought everything back to normal. These problems haunt the game, giving it a constant feeling of bugginess and unpolishedness, halting it from ever achieving the perfect atmosphere other parts of the game work so hard to achieve. After enough exploring, you'll get to the location of another Altera base at some arbitrary point that I haven't quite figured out. Maybe it's the amount of alien artifacts that you've scanned, or a certain amount of in-game time has elapsed. Regardless, you'll head over and find your way onto a large iceberg, bigger than any so far. Here, you'll not only find PDAs and resources, but also the remaining fragments of the ice bike, as well as a constructible robot penguin. Being above water will constantly lower your temperature, and to get some back you'll have to get into a cave, under a thermal vent, or jump back into the water. Which, yeah. Please do not jump into the Arctic water to warm yourself up. You can trust me, it won't help. At the moment, there's only a limited area you can explore. To go any further, you'll first have to unlock this bridge. At first, I thought you'd have to craft the jump module for the newly obtained bike to gap the bridge, so I went all the way back to my base, crafted it, then came all the way back, each time having to find my way through a maze of holes in the ice, only to figure out that the jump module sucks ass, barely getting you over small rocks, and what you really needed to do was create some hydraulic fuel to get the bridge to extend. So I returned all the way to my base. I didn't have the resources for it, spent half an hour returning to areas collecting the resources, game crashes, reboot it, recollect the resources, then returned all the way back again. Just to recap, I knew how to obtain all the resources required to extend this bridge, yet the entire process took me 2 hours of moving in a straight line back and forth, getting annoyed at ice caves for all looking the exact same, and collecting resources that I already knew the location of. 2 full hours of tedium and non-engaging gameplay. Well, the bike and the pangolin. Let's talk about them. Those who saw the pattern of all vehicles being reused from the original game and got excited for the Cyclops, prepare to be disappointed when you find out that it was replaced with this shitty speeder. The law of equivalent exchange says that to create something, something else of equal value must be lost. But in this case, we lost the coolest submarine ever that could store entire other machines inside of it. For a snow bike that moves in a similar fashion to molasses, ramming into rocks despite hovering over them, and freezing while nothing but air is hitting it. I mean, I guess it works well enough for getting around the Arctic, but with its short battery life, massive storage requirement, and poor controls, it's just annoying to use. You don't go very fast, nor can you turn hard enough to drift. It's simply not fun to ride, not even getting close to breaching the speed of what you would expect from a land speeder. Not to mention the addition of the most underwhelming jump upgrade ever. But wait, there's more. I would consider the spy pangolin to be the worst implementation of anything in this game. Everything else in this game adds. The Sea Glide lets you move faster. The Sea Truck lets you travel farther and dive deeper. The Prawn Suit lets you gather more resources and defend against enemies better. All of these actions are doable without these machines, but they enhance the experience. Then there's the Penguin. It enters caves too small for the player to enter and might find some resources. Without caves, there would be no point in the penguins, and without the penguins, there would be no point in the small caves. I wouldn't mind this if it provided a chance for interesting gameplay, but unless this looks thrilling to you, I wouldn't say it does. It also has an annoyingly small distance limit, so if you want to stay warm inside of a cave while using it, you'd better hope one is nearby, or you're gonna have to get cold and risk death. Traversing the cold overworld is much tougher than the deep sea, and it's highly encouraged that you bring a vehicle with you. I always preferred the Prawn Suit for its longer battery life, storage, and defense, but with all the caves and caverns, I often had to switch to the bike once the passages got too narrow. Once you get past the bridge, you'll enter a much more open area and be warned with the following message.
I recall ravenous creatures tunneling beneath the ice.
This is unfortunately another example of Subnautica screwing itself over. While this could have been a moment where the player fears for their life, not knowing what this monster could be or what it might do, it's plastered on the middle of the game's logo, so everyone playing the game will know exactly what it is, removing much of the mental fear that would come with facing an unknown Leviathan. So, a good portion of the fear is gone, but it doesn't remove all of it. And it could redeem itself with interesting gameplay mechanics. Oh, like maybe it'll be like the Molduga and can only emerge in certain places. To get past, the player will have to speed through rounding bends with utmost accuracy, praying not to get caught as it rampages behind you. Yeah, no. It does look extremely deadly, seeing how it hunts the snow stalker with ease, an animal that has evolved in the same biome as this monster. But for some reason it's not nearly as effective against the player. It does have a limited area it can attack in, but instead of chasing you, it'll peek its head above the ground, often glitching you off your bike, then jump around a bit. It might even bump into you, who knows. To be fair, with the response system Subnautica has in place, they couldn't afford to make it very dangerous, as death sends you all the way back to your vehicle, which could very well be all the way at the entrance of this zone. So if this creature was as deadly as it should be, you would constantly be sent back, requiring long periods of backtracking to where you died. I think the best solution would be to let it patrol an area with small safe zones dispersed around it, with a few paths to different things. It would move around its area, and the player would have to make mad dashes from safe zone to safe zone. This way the ice worm could be allowed to become as deadly as it should be, even one-shotting the player, as it would only send them back to the last safe zone, instead of all the way to their vehicle. Granted, it would remove much of the tension knowing you'd only be sent back a minute or two, but there'd still be a lot more tension than a creature that jumps around, rarely posing any threat, and at least this way it could have some interesting gameplay accompanying it. There are also tons of tunnels it's dug that the player can enter, and I expected you'd have to find cover or a small hole to hide in each time it came through its tunnel, but it never does. After traveling long enough in this icy climate, you'll find the alien part you needed and return to your base, never visiting this zone again. At this point, I'd scanned all of the alien parts I needed, and all that was left was for me to collect the resources to build the body and put them together. Disappointingly, there is nothing interesting done here. All these items are from biomes you've already visited and already collected dozens of times, or at least you should have. One of the main ingredients was synthetic fibers, and to create that you needed spiral plant clippings. Yet, I had never even seen this plant in the 20 hours I had played. I tried the mineral scanner, but it didn't have the plant I was looking for, much less any at all. It was worth a shot. But then I rebuilt the scanner room, hoping it would give me a hint. But once again it proved fruitless when it didn't even allow me to scan for it. Since the game doesn't tell you anything about the items you're looking for, much less what region they're found in, I would literally need to search the entire map looking for this one plant. I got geared up and got ready to go searching far and wide. I also kept my eye open for the parallel processing unit, the thing that's required to take down the satellite from Marguerite, which I never ended up finding. So, I gathered up my gear and went on an epic journey, going to the deepest of caves and the farthest of biomes, spending hours, days looking for the elusive spiral plant clippings and parallel processing unit. All for naught. I returned to my base in defeat, ready to look up a guide, but on my way back I thought that since I was out here, I might as well collect some titanium. Yes, it may be the most common resource in an early game biome, but it beats returning to the base with nothing. As I moved across the sea floor, I saw this plant. My spirits heightened and I approached the spiral plant. And it's actually the bullseye shroom, not the spiral one. How could I have made such an obvious mistake? God damn it. I don't mind putting a lot of work into a goal, whether that's running for hours to get to the peak of a mountain, or grinding for days to become strong enough to beat a boss. As long as I'm still progressing by some degree, I'm not too picky on how quickly it happens. What I do mind is when I put a lot of time into something and I get absolutely nothing out of it. Subnautica fulfills that hate by crashing without saving, losing up to hours of progress, and by making me search for hours without any reward. I finally return to my base in defeat, and think of the one place I haven't double checked, the crashed ship. So I return and somehow manage to find all 3 parts of the processing unit. I had already gone through this ship early in my playthrough, but with Subnautica's lack of ways to locate valuables, you can swim right by the item you're looking for and never realize it's there. But now's not the time for thinking of improvements. We've made progress for the first time in 5 hours. I put together the rest of the test override module and hooked it up to the satellite. I get a message from Marguerite telling me to meet her at her greenhouse a kilometer east of here. She has a present for me. This is it. She must have the plant growing in her greenhouse. I head right over and can't fucking find it. She did say a kilometer east of here, right? Yeah, so where is she? And why didn't the game put a beacon on her location like they do for everything else? Huh, can't find her. Maybe she was joking? I'm so done with this. Oh my god, I happened to stumble across her greenhouse. This is the moment I've been waiting for. Okay, hurry up and spout out your dialogue so I can finally get my hands on this elusive plant. What? Nope. No spiral clippings. Just a bit of story. Maybe I should go over that though. Sam, the main character's sister, was working on this planet with a company named Altera, known for their greedy tendencies. She was on a mission to learn more about the planet as well as what happened with the previous ships they sent down to this planet which never returned. She ended up dying from a cave accident due to ignorance, but Robin doesn't believe that, as her sister was very diligent, so she decides to investigate herself. While on the planet, she finds Alan, an architect. These were a race of very powerful aliens, but were almost completely wiped out by a dangerous disease which caused billions upon billions of deaths. The remaining ones, such as Alan, had to upload themselves onto sanctuaries, keeping them safe but alone and unable to do anything. Before doing so, they managed to create a research facility on this planet that shot down any ship either entering or leaving. I guess to slow the spread of the virus? I'm not too sure. Wouldn't a warning sign be just as good? Or at least it might stop people from being shot so often. Regardless, Robin finds everyone dead, except Marguerite, who tells her about the fact that other researchers also got infected by the virus, and those uninfected tried to leave those infected behind. but unfortunately got shot down. I mean, how did they not know about this cannon by now? It's taken out multiple massive Altera ships within the past dozen years on this planet alone. Anyway, those they left on the planet all slowly died from starvation or disease, which raises two questions. If they died from disease, why isn't Marguerite dead? And if they died from hunger, how? There's like food and plants everywhere. I'm not saying there is no answer, I'm just saying I never figured it out. Back when Rose and the other researchers were alive, they unearthed both the alien artifacts as well as this giant infected Leviathan. They couldn't manage to get into the alien bases because Alan realized the company might do bad things with their technology, so made it impossible to enter. Yet he still sent distress signals? Anyhow, they did manage to unearth the Leviathan, but Altera didn't cure it. Instead, they wanted to collect data from it, research it, and potentially use the disease as a weapon. So Sam somehow got her hands on a cure that an advanced alien race capable of teleportation couldn't, and was gonna cure the Leviathan to stop Altera from collecting samples, when she gets hit by a cave collapse. The story goes that it was really someone from Altera that stopped her from curing the beast, and had to make it seem like an accident. Later you can cure it using the samples Sam hid, receiving the greatest reward of all, closure. Let's fucking go. Or you can be like me and never realize you were supposed to use it on the Leviathan, and finish the game without ever curing it. So that's Sam's story. Back to Alan, who was a researcher for the Architects before being forced into the sanctuaries by the outbreak. At some point he made a critical error in judgment while handling the disease, potentially releasing it into the universe, and presumably killing the rest of his kind. But he isn't exactly sure, as he had to seclude himself inside of the sanctuary. So he has Robin create a body for him by scanning other dead architects, which will allow him to go see for himself. And yeah, that brings us to current events. Oh, where were we game-wise again? Oh yeah. So, it turns out they're in an early game biome, and for 5 hours I just missed them. Every single time. Not good. Let's talk a bit more about Subnautica's losing fight against realism and game function. It's a tough nail to pin down, especially for survival games. Do you want to make the game extremely immersive, even if it means some things will take longer and be more tedious? For example, the storage system? Or do you want to prefer game function, making the game more enjoyable even if it may not be entirely realistic? For example, you shouldn't realistically be able to swim deeper than your metal machines, but it makes the game more interesting. As you have seen throughout this video and in the examples I just gave, Subnautica attempts to play both sides, sometimes preferring realism and other times game function. I don't know if this is due to laziness, a lack of care for consistency, or for no reason at all, but regardless, it brings the game down for easily avoidable reasons. Generally, when they prefer game function over realism, it's a bit less harmful, like the fact that it only takes a few small rocks to create an entire room. It's not by any means realistic, but it would be incredibly annoying if you had to gather a realistic amount of rocks for each room you built. Unfortunately, preferring realism to game function can have much worse consequences, and they tend to do it far more often. The storage system is by far the biggest one. It makes no sense to make the process of gathering items that you already have take minutes long instead of seconds. But I've already talked about the storage enough, so instead I'll talk more about the relevant topic, resource gathering. An area in which Subnautica fails to produce both realism and interesting gameplay. For one, it takes forever to get to certain biomes, so if you ever need just one more mineral shard from the Crystal Caves, you'll have to make a half-hour journey just to get it. And this isn't too interesting of a journey either. After visiting a biome more than once, you'll have familiarized yourself with its scenery and potential threats. You'll simply be holding the forwards button down on your joystick for 15 minutes or so, grab what you need, get lost for a bit, then back again without any engaging gameplay. But to be fair, this does teach the player to make sure they plan their trips, ensuring they have what they need before leaving. And anyway, it wouldn't fit with Subnautica's realistic standards if there was a fast travel system. I mean, it's not like each biome has a structure in it made by aliens that could also teleport or anything. I mean, this would have saved me hours of holding forwards through the sea while returning to biomes, and it still would have been realistic. We've already powered on one teleporter with these alien cubes, and there's plenty more of those where they came from, so why not have one at each alien structure, or at least a few of them? Unfortunately, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Now I'll talk about just how hard it is to find items, much less get to them. We can again look at Minecraft and Breath of the Wild for two different solutions to the problem of searching for items. In Minecraft, each block is incredibly distinct. You'll immediately be able to tell a valuable block from a normal one just by its looks, even from 100 meters away. Compared to Subnautica, where for some reason this plant is worthless and can't be interacted with, while this one over here has resources required to beat the game. Breath of the Wild also shares the same distinctness of valuable resources by putting a little sparkle on them. Being able to scan an area and immediately see where all the valuables are would do wonders for Subnautica, but another one of Breath of the Wild's mechanics is a scanner that lets you track certain resources. While only mildly useful in Breath of the Wild, where specific items are far less relevant with next to no crafting system, it would be great for Subnautica. Now, wait a minute, we already have the mineral scanner. Is that not good enough? Well, in theory yes, but a few minor, completely unneeded details take it from a very useful item to one I hardly ever used. Details only added for a slight sense of realism. First and foremost, it only scans for minerals and certain fragments, so it posed no help searching for the plant I spent 5 hours looking for. Here I have to ask the devs why. This is a futuristic technology, so why wouldn't you remove the mineral part of Mineral Scanner and let it scan for anything? And as one final idiotic design choice, they don't let you use it and any other machine at the same time, not even the Sea Glide. So if you want to scan as many places as possible with this dumb machine, you'll be moving at about half your normal pace and have to constantly be going to the surface for air. Isn't that just dandy? That should be the worst of the worst. I desperately hoped it was, but somehow they made multiple more segments that are neither realistic nor do they better gameplay. When entering the overworld, you will constantly lose temperature until freezing, and you quickly learn of a suit that will protect you from the cold, requiring Snowstalker fur. These guys. So I got close to one and cut at it with my knife, hoping to skin it, to no avail. I thought maybe you had to kill it first, so I returned with my prawn suit and beat it to death. Hopped out and tried to skin it again, to no avail. Obviously not realistic. How else do you skin something if not with a knife? Maybe its skin is too tough, so I tried again with the laser cutter, to no avail. I thought it must have been glitched, but after trying multiple other Snowstalkers, nothing ever worked. I then deduced that it must be because I hadn't unlocked the tool to do this task, so I continued playing, and beat the entire game without ever discovering how to create this cold suit, something rather important to your time in the overworld. So how exactly was I supposed to collect their fur? Well, isn't it obvious? You pull out the spy pangolin, the same one that has had its only purpose be shown to be entering small holes in the wall, and drive it right over to the Snowstalker. You know, presumably the pangolin's main predator. Then you use its tiny mechanical arm to pull off its fur as it completely ignores its prey. So, how exactly was I supposed to figure that out again? And why couldn't I just grab it off with my own hands and knife after I'd killed the thing? This interesting design choice definitely doesn't add to the realism of this fictional world, nor does it give it the chance for interesting gameplay. I cannot wrap my head around why the game devs made these choices. And the list goes on. You can build the Thumper, which I assume to be some sort of defense against the sea creatures. So I built it, but it never did anything even when I got attacked. Lost on what to do next, I checked its description. Thumps things. Well, apparently fucking not. It just did nothing as I was attacked. So what you're really supposed to do is use it to distract the ice worm by having it slam the ground. What, was I supposed to just use it everywhere on the map until I figured this out? At no point is there any indication that the ice worm can be distracted by sound. So why Subnautica? Why can't you collect snowstalker fur with a knife? Why aren't there teleporters at each alien base to make travel less of a chore? Why can you swim right by the item you've spent hours looking for without realizing it's there? Why does the game crash every time I do something productive? Why wasn't the mineral scanner or scanner room allowed to scan for plants? And why is its text too small to read while playing on the TV? Why does it take multiple minutes each and every time you want to craft something that you already have the materials for? Why a lot of things? I do not know. To me, these seem like obvious changes that would take maybe a few hours to fix, that could have been done during the years of early access. So I can only assume that the devs either don't see these as problems, or simply don't care. Well, either way, we finally have all the items required to build Alan's body. I'll just grab them all now. Where was that again? Oh, just a second. You can totally skip ahead. Keep in mind, I already have all the resources required. This is just me finding them all in storage. And just like that, we're ready to go on our final journey of this game, down to the Crystal Caves to create Alan's body. The Crystal Caves summarize the strengths and weaknesses of Subnautica to a T. The strong and amazing feeling of mystery and amazement when you enter a new biome is fully present, looking nothing like all the other flora-filled biomes you've been seeing the whole game, capturing the same sense of wonder that worked so well in the early game. Then there's the terrible item collection, forcing you to make a massive trip even if you only need one more item from the biome, as well as the chance that you'll miss the alien artifact here, causing you to spend hours looking elsewhere, never knowing it was previously right under your nose. Then, a potent mix of both good and bad in the implementation of the Shadow Leviathan, and what I personally think is a phenomenal accidental success. When you first enter the biome, your PDA warns you of a Leviathan-class creature residing in the area, similar to what it does with the ice worm. But unlike that land creature, this Leviathan isn't plastered on the poster art, so the player has no clue what it might be like. This was a very smart move, because if the player has to learn of the Leviathan themselves, by the time they do, it could have already attacked them. Then it loses its scariness and mystery. But this way, I was aware from the very start, peeking around every corner, scanning for whatever beast the PDA might be referring to. Then, bam! It attacked me out of nowhere. I even jumped out of my seat a bit. But, just like that, the fear was gone. It attacks with the same attack you've already seen many times before, deals a minor amount of damage to my prawn, and immediately swims away. As soon as this Shadow Leviathan showed me exactly what it could do, it hopped straight from fear to annoyance with the rest of its friends. Maybe it could have lived up to its name as the Shadow Leviathan and kept some of its mystery and ability to create fear by hiding outside of the player's vision and attacking without any big tells, but nay. Each and every time it attacks, it lets out a massive roar, giving the player ample time to return to their prawn if by some chance they left it, and get ready to take its attack. Then it swims away for a bit, you fix the prawn, and it attacks again. This goes on until it loses interest and swims away. To get to the base that builds Alan's body, you first have to enter a subsection of the Crystal Caves known as the Fabricator Caves. This, while I'm completely unaware of how intentional it was the best part of the game. You see, the Fabricator Caves are just a fraction deeper than the Crystal Caves, and it just so happened that my Prawn Suit wasn't upgraded to the max, not allowing it to go any deeper. Not wanting to go all the way back to my base and find the resources to upgrade it, I decided to leave my suit of armor behind, swimming the last few hundred meters. The Shadow Leviathan pounced, and in a nick of time I got under a small opening in the crystals too small for the Leviathan. It didn't take long for it to find its way around, and again I had to find cover under a small crystal. This was amazing. The roars that used to be an annoying notice to stop collecting resources and temporarily get back into the prawn is now a terrifying reminder letting you know it's right on your tail. Its slow yet repetitive attack patterns allow the player to get from cover to cover without giving them too much time, and the limited oxygen forces the player to make riskier plays rather than camping as long as they want for it to go away. And the shimmer of fear that ran down my back when I noticed I not only needed to keep track of one, but two of these creatures was indescribable. Of course, if it ever did manage to catch me, the illusion would have been shattered. I would have taken the damage, then healed with one of my many health kits, and realized that in reality, it was nothing to be feared. But I never did. Intentionally or unintentionally, the cover spots and attack patterns of this beast just barely let me escape unscathed, so I never lost that fear, successfully managing to keep me squirming in my seat, not knowing the horrors it might do to me if I ever was caught in its jaws. I would have never experienced this had my depth module been fully upgraded, like it should have been by the end of the game, and as I'm sure many other players did and subsequently never experienced this. They simply would have repeated the process of getting attacked, forced into a mini cutscene, and keep going until it inevitably attacks again. To let everyone experience one of the most enjoyable moments of this game, they should have made this cave the deepest place on the map, deeper than any machine could bring you, forcing you to get out and swim the last few hundred meters, making sure everyone got to play out this tense chase, instead of only those who were too lazy to fully upgrade their prawn by the end of the game. We get to the base and create Alan's body. He is immensely pleased, and it almost seems like he's about to turn on the player. However, he assures us he will not, and sends us all the way back to an alien artifact near our original base, warning us to complete anything else we wanted to do on this planet before leaving. I look at my incredibly ugly base one last time, and I know what must be done. Okay, I think I'm ready to leave. Once you arrive, he opens a portal and brings us to a massive phase gate, allowing for near instant travel. He creates a ship, you both get on, and prepare to enter the portal. After taking off and going through the many gates required to get to his homeworld, Alan discusses what they might find. Will his family be alive, or will the population be decimated? We pass through the final gate and arrive at a stormy planet, flying under the clouds to reveal a futuristic city. I sit forwards in my seat. This is what the entire story has been leading up to. The clouds disperse, and as one final fuck you, they leave it ambiguous whether any architects are left or not, ending it with a line worthy of a shitty romantic drama.
With you, I am ready to face whatever awaits.
Subnautica Below Zero is full of things that I love. An inventive and well thought out world, exploration of massive and completely unknown biomes with haunting beasts lurking within, a satisfying progression system, cool creature designs, interesting characters, and best of all, passion. I truly believe that there was a tremendous amount of heart and soul put into this game, so it crushes me to see that passion buried by tedious systems, a lack of polish to fundamental mechanics, and indecisiveness between realism and game function. Whether it was due to burnout or a lack of time, many of the final touches required to make a functioning game were simply not done. I mean, you can even see the process of the team's motivation dropping with the names of creatures, starting with crazy names like Breinwig and the Cryptosuchus, and then slowly descending into the most literal titles like the Ice Worm and Sea Monkey. With this game having so many things I like, it always felt like I should have been having fun, but I wasn't. I couldn't. Even with all the great things about Subnautica Below Zero, I already knew the machines I was going to get, items I'd have to collect, and that the game was going to lose my progress at any second, demotivating me from trying anything new. With a bit more time and thought put into the final few steps of development, this could very well have become one of my all-time favorite games. but from fumbling the realism versus gameplay ball, mechanics in dire need of simple fixes, and constant crashes on a home console, it ends up feeling more like the first early access game of a new team with a genius but unrefined concept, rather than a fully released sequel of a smash hit. Wow, you made it all the way through. Impressive. This last part is just me talking a bit, so feel free to click off. Regardless, thank you so much for watching this video. I put a lot of effort into them, and knowing someone else enjoyed it means the world to me. I'm still an extremely small channel, so when I see that I've got a single new subscriber, it really makes my day. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.